Eleanor and her husband, Thomas, had just moved into an old farmhouse on the outskirts of a quiet Midwestern town. The house had been abandoned for years, its wooden floors warped, the wallpaper peeling, and the barn in the back leaning as though it might collapse at any moment. Thomas saw potential. Eleanor saw isolation. She was 7 months pregnant, and though she smiled at her husband's optimism, her heart grew heavy in the silence of the wide, empty fields. At night, while Thomas worked the late shift at the mill, Eleanor would sit on the porch, rocking slowly in an old chair left by the previous owners. The crickets sang, and the wind carried the scent of corn and soil. Sometimes, though, she swore she heard whispers beneath the wind, soft, breathy words she could never quite understand. Her unborn child kicked often, almost violently. And whenever it did, Eleanor felt her vision blur for just a moment. Her reflection in the glass of the porch door seemed wrong. The eyes looking back at her were pale, almost colorless. She never mentioned this to Thomas. The first to notice something strange was their closest neighbor, an old widow named Mrs. Garland, who lived half a mile down the road. One morning, Eleanor walked past her property on her way to the small town market. Mrs. Garland greeted her warmly at first, but when Eleanor turned her head to respond, the old woman froze. Her eyes. They were entirely white, no pupils, no irises. Just blank, milky orbs staring through her. Mrs. Garland gasped, dropping the basket of apples she had been carrying. But when she blinked and looked again, Eleanor's eyes appeared normal, hazel, warm, almost shy. Eleanor tilted her head and asked softly, "Is something wrong?" The old woman forced a smile. "No, dear, nothing at all. But that night, Mrs. Garland locked her doors and whispered prayers until dawn." Thomas began to notice Eleanor's odd behavior, too. He would come home late and find her sitting in the bedroom in the dark, humming softly to her belly. The tune was always the same, low, steady, almost like a lullaby, but unfamiliar and unsettling. One night, unable to contain his unease, he asked, "What is that song?" Eleanor didn't stop humming. She only smiled faintly and replied, "It's not a song. He's teaching me." Thomas frowned. "He? Who?" Her smile widened. "The baby." He laughed nervously. "Babies don't teach songs, Eleanor." But she only stared at him, her hazel eyes flickering pale in the moonlight. Worried, Thomas convinced Eleanor to see the town doctor. During the checkup, the doctor pressed his stethoscope against her stomach and immediately frowned. The heartbeat was irregular. Not weak, no, it was too strong. Too fast. Too much like two heartbeats overlapping. "Strange," the doctor muttered, adjusting his stethoscope. Eleanor watched him with her strange, unblinking gaze. The doctor looked up and suddenly froze. Her eyes had turned completely white again, staring at him without recognition, without humanity. The doctor pulled back quickly, knocking over his tray of instruments. By the time he looked again, her eyes were normal. "You're healthy," he stammered, voice shaking. "Both of you. Perfectly healthy." But when Eleanor and Thomas left, the doctor locked his office and took a long drink of whiskey before daring to see his next patient. It was the second week of August when everything unraveled. Thomas came home early from work, tired but eager to surprise Eleanor with her favorite pie from town. The house was dark. Upstairs, he heard her humming again. "Eleanor," he called, his voice hesitant. No answer, just the humming, low and steady. He climbed the stairs, the wooden steps creaking beneath his boots. The bedroom door was ajar. He pushed it open and froze. Eleanor sat on the bed, her nightgown stained dark around her swollen belly. Her hands moved slowly over her skin, tracing shapes as though following something pressing from within. The belly bulged unnaturally, rippling, as if sharp limbs were dragging along the inside. Her eyes were wide open, glowing pale in the dim light. "Eleanor," Thomas whispered. She turned her head toward him in a jerking, unnatural motion. Her smile spread too wide. "You shouldn't have come home yet," she whispered in a sing-song voice. The bulge in her stomach shifted violently. For a moment, Thomas swore he saw the outline of claws pressing against her skin from the inside. "What's happening to you?" His voice trembled. Eleanor giggled softly. "He's almost ready. He sees through me now." The humming grew louder, but this time it wasn't just Eleanor. It was echoing, a deeper, guttural sound coming from within her belly. Thomas stumbled back, dropping the pie. The tin clattered against the floor. He turned and fled the house. By morning, Thomas returned with the sheriff and the town doctor. They climbed the stairs cautiously. The bedroom door stood wide open. The sheets were soaked in blood. The window was shattered. And on the wooden floor, smeared in crimson, were two small handprints, far too small to belong to an adult. Eleanor was gone. So was the child. In the weeks that followed, townsfolk whispered of strange sightings. Some said they saw Eleanor wandering the cornfields at night, her swollen belly still unnaturally full, her eyes pale and empty. Others swore they heard her humming just beyond the tree line, a low lullaby carried by the wind. Animals grew restless, refusing to leave their pens. Children cried without reason, and sometimes, on the darkest nights, neighbors claimed they saw another shape moving beside her in the fields. Small, lithe, wrongly shaped. No one ever found Eleanor. No one ever found the child. But to this day, locals warn newcomers never to look too long into the fields at night. Because sometimes, if you do, you'll see her, standing among the cornstalks, her pale, empty eyes locked on you. Her belly shifting unnaturally, as though something inside is still waiting to be born. And if you hear her humming, it's already too late. End.